So welcome and happy St. George's Day. I think, unless I've got the days muddled up, it's very easy to do at the moment. Do you recognise that? It's something I used to be fascinated by as a child. I think many children are. You find them kind of on the beach, and it's kind of interesting. I've spent so long setting up for this, well, I mean, not hugely long, but an hour and a half, and that wouldn't normally be any issue. But as the saying goes, time and tide waits or waiteth for no man or woman, and we're here in the place where you find these, and this is a mermaid's purse, and it's making me think of Sarah, my assistant, for making these videos, and how grateful I am, because trying to set this up has been almost impossible. The tide is rushing in. I want to kind of talk about seaweeds. I've been rushing back and forth, grabbing things which are rapidly going underwater, and all I've got is a hint of a woman, assistant, or some helper, and that's a mermaid. This is a mermaid's purse. I think it's the egg sac of a dogfish. I think so. It's also, people often ask me, which is the strangest wild food I've ever eaten, and there's several, and I think this is definitely up there with them, because it must have been about 5-6 years ago. I was looking for razor clams with a friend of mine. Raf, you might even be watching this at some point, but we didn't have much success going to the edge of the shore at the low tide with a view to tipping salt down razor clam holes and watching them pop up. We didn't get any, to be honest, because we couldn't find any holes. But what we did find was a thornback ray that someone had obviously fished, and the line had snapped because it had the tackle in there, in its mouth. But it was barely alive, just there on the edge of the shore. But because we didn't have any razor clams, we thought, okay, well, there's a fish, that we'll eat that. So we decided to cook that on the beach. And while we were gutting it, I opened it up, and it had a fresh one of these, which it had swallowed whole, which amazes me given the size of the mouth of the thornback ray. But what was so wonderful about that is, for years I had wanted to eat these after I saw a kind of natural history program, and I don't know if it was one of the David Attenborough ones, but it was on some island, and it was about some monkeys that were really kind of in tune with the tides, as I'm clearly not. I need to really tap into my inner monkey. And so they waited till the low tide, and they went down and they gathered these, and there was a wonderful sequence of them ripping these open and gorging on the kind of egg inside, and I'd kind of wanted to do that ever since. So this one in the thornback ray we actually cooked and ate, and it was delicious. I don't think it will ever happen again. Finding one in the thornback ray, or I guess just finding them walking along the shore, because you'd need to be diving really to find them. But anyway, I massively digress, because what I'd like to do today is introduce you to some seaweeds, because I've gone from Ashdown Forest to the North Kent coast, and I've done that because I need to look after my mother for a week, which is great because I get to see her. It also means that when I go back to the Ashdown Forest, I'm going to be self-isolated for a week, or however much it is. In fact, I might just camp in the woods. But I don't know if you can see any, basically I can't see into the camera, so I don't even know if I'm in shot. I hope so, but we'll try our best. So I've got a fire going here. I don't know if you can see, let's see if we can see. Can you see that? So I'm just burning this down to hot embers while we go and look for some seaweeds. And you'll kind of see, look, so the low tide this morning was at about 7:30, and now where are we? We are at about 11:15, maybe 11:30 now, so a few hours after. So there we are, look, time and tide waiteth for no man, unless that man wants wet boots. But that's okay, because there's still a few seaweeds showing. So let's go and have a look at those. So I guess this is the fundamental point about seaweeds, is that to see the full complement of what's available, you kind of need to time your arrival on the beach when the tide's at its lowest, really, because seaweeds grow at different zones on the beach. You have some right up at the beach that hardly get covered by water at all in the splash zone, thinking of things like channel wrack, and then still on the kind of upper shore you have other seaweeds like the wracks, the other wracks. I mean, one I can see here, look, have a look. Let's flip this around. So this is one you might kind of recognise, or certainly be familiar with if you either live coastally or as a kid and you visited the coast and you found that seaweed where it has bladders that you pop. There's one there. So this is bladder wrack, and let's find a better bit that's got more bladders. Oh, there's one. You see? Right there. Not many on this, to be honest. Oh look, here we are. Couple of good bladders at the top of that one. But it's fresh, so it's not gonna pop that much. So this is a great seaweed to use. Although at this stage it's reproductive, so it's got these receptacles on there. Now, actually, this is a nice one. Look, you can see the difference between bladders, which are further down the frond there, often in pairs, not always, and the receptacles, which are these kind of fattened protrusions at the end, which you squeeze them. Look at that. You get the kind of the gel that has the kind of reproductive, almost like sperm-like stuff, if you like. Yeah, receptacles. So you can eat that raw or cooked, if the beach is clean enough, that is. And you know, where is a clean enough beach? It's always the question. Always the question. But as long as there's no heavy industry around, or no obvious pipes, outflows from sewage, you know, just trying a little bit is not going to do you any harm. But the big issue is, yeah, if you are picking, if you are gathering from, or you have a shore it's like that, well, you basically don't gather from there. So yeah, so like water quality is like key really to collecting delicious seaweeds. And what do we got? So let's just see if there's anything in this little bit that's still exposed. Ceiling. What's that? Okay, this is great actually, because a little bit of something, there's a little bit of something I picked earlier, which I'll flip this around, you can see, before it gets washed away. It's this seaweed here, which is laver, Porphyra species. And look, there's a whole load I gathered earlier. This is absolutely wonderful. It's one of my favourite seaweeds because you can do so much with it. It's the one that the Welsh traditionally, but probably other coastal regions around the UK, but the Welsh in particular, make something called lava bread or laver bread. Barrabrith, I think it is in Welsh. And yeah, it's not really a bread at all. It's the seaweed cooked for a long time and it becomes kind of like a paste. Absolutely delicious. And yeah, well worth using to make that. So it's cooked like a paste, and I was just looking up ahead because the other perils of trying to film when a tide's coming in places where people are walking along the beach is like the seaweed I can see, which I placed on a rock to show you, is now no longer there after the chap just walked by with his dog. Hopefully it's still there. But anyway, it's a good flavour, lava bread. Wonderful. Sometimes it's you know, oats are put in there or kind of bacon fat, but you know, you don't have to do that. It's great. So here we are, a couple of wonderful things I'd like to show you. So this here, Ooh. Let's get it washed up a little bit. In fact, look at that, this is great because this is one of my favourite seaweeds, and it's called Dulse, and it's just growing on this bit of flint here. And I picked this earlier at the kind of low tide. We've got some here, and again like this I kind of washed earlier. This one's just like nicely washed by the sea. And now there are so many ways of using seaweed, but what I'm going to do today is just kind of deep fry a little bit. And if you're going to do that, throw this back to the sea. So here's some young dulse floating in the water, and like a lot of new growth, whether on land plants or seaweeds, the new growth just looks kind of lovely and young and tender. Look at that. Whereas with dulse you have kind of the old stuff hanging around from last year. But note, I often call this like mother of dulse because it's from these kind of central fronds that the new growth arises to a certain extent, but it also, you know, can just come from the rock. New growth that begins there. There's some floating in the water in the sun. You see the colour a bit better. But note on the new growth, it has just a very simple edge to it. There's no kind of growth on the edge of the new frond. There. Yeah, seaweed that has kind of a lot of kind of seeming kind of growth at the edge, or rather has a margin that's not kind of just a simple line like this. It's one called beautiful eyelash weed. Wonderful name, but not a great edible seaweed. But similar colour and grows similar locations, such as this one, the kind of mid shore to kind of lower shore. Probably my favourite seaweed, dulse. A lot of people's favourites. If you're going to do that, then really I think washing it in the seawater is a kind of lovely thing to do. Oh, by the way, have a look at this. So, way! So you can see that we've got actually with this thickened frond here is a little bit of an old frond of one of the racks, and the dulse is growing on it on the stem. It's growing as an epiphyte, so that means it's growing on the stem of another seaweed. So it grows both from the rock, on the rock, and as an epiphyte, this seaweed. We've got some of that. And the other thing which I found, which is just kind of drifted, has become dislodged. I'm going to wash it. It's this one here, which grows right at the kind of low tide area. And you see it has a kind of holdfast, this part here, which it attaches to the rock, but it's all got kind of yanked off somehow. But that's very interesting because we're going to be talking about that a bit later. Now, the other thing that's here is this, which is dulse. No, it's not. Erase that. This is Carrageenan, or Irish moss. And what I really wanted to show you, but again, it's too late now, is I wanted to show you how, can I do it? No, can't do it, it's too rough and there aren't any kind of little pools here. But I wanted to show you how one of the ways of identifying this is, like, if it's in the water and the water's quite clear on a sunny day like this, then it actually iridesces, like the edge of the fronds kind of splits the light. But yeah, can't really do that now. Can I do that now? I'm really tempted. I want to find somewhere where I can do that so you can see. I don't know that I can. Just sit. Ooh! Ooh! Look, I wonder if I can do it there. Oh! I'm gonna get soaked. Can you see? Hey! Look, can you see? Can you see? Can you see? If I get out my shadow out of the way. Come on. Can you see that light little blue? See that? And the tinges of let's see, can you see little hints of kind of lilac or blue just at the fronds, at the tips of the fronds there, just where the light is getting split. It's kind of beautiful. Can you see that? Can't see what I'm looking at through this screen, but I'm looking at it not through the screen. I can see it really clearly, so I hope you can. So that's a really lovely seaweed, Chondrus crispus, the botanical name, the Latin name. And actually there's a huge industry like working with that seaweed to extract the gel from it, which is called Carrageenan. Sometimes this seaweed is called Carrageen, and the gel extracted, as I might do, by boiling, is called Carrageenan, and it just has amazing qualities in that it's kind of unctuous, kind of oily, and so it's used in a lot of kind of low fat kind of dressings, salad dressings, but also it's traditionally used as a setting agent for things like panna cotta, and actually just as a thickening agent, not just setting. So for thickening kind of milk products, often you might see in some cream or something like that on the label that it's got Carrageen, or what it is, it's an E number, E307, something like that, maybe, not sure if it is that, but that's what it is. I mean, it's something that's in food is quite a controversial ingredient in the sense that some kind of degraded forms are linked to cancer. I'm not sure what it is, stomach cancer or something, I'm not sure, but when you're gathering this fresh, that really isn't an issue at all, which is a wonderful thing. So let me see, where can I hang up put my seaweed here so it won't get all sandy. Right, that is looking perfect for what I want. So I just might add another couple of logs. Got some wonderful driftwood today. So we got a couple of seaweeds just before the tide scuppered my grander plans, but to be honest, I just wanted this to be a very kind of gentle introduction to seaweed, and actually it will be, because I can talk you through a couple I got earlier, and actually something which will help you immensely if you're thinking about starting to think about seaweed as a wild food. So first thing, just because I've never done this before, but just because I've been washing my hands so much lately, they're getting really dry. And I'm just looking at something I prepared a little bit earlier. I was talking about the Carrageenan, which, by the way, because I'm not recording this live anymore, I could do things like this. Watch this clip of me actually picking it earlier. So here we've got some Carrageen, some Irish moss, and it's got a flat kind of dividing frond. Flat is the key thing. It iridesces in the sun actually when it's in the water. I might show you that. So we can extract the gel from this Carrageenan, but we can also extract it from this seaweed, which is, well, not this one, because this is Carrageen, Irish moss too, but the one next to it grows in exactly the same habitat. It's called Grape pipweed, or Mastocarpus stellatus, and it's very similar, except the fronds are slightly incurved, if you can see that. Almost like a, there we are, like a kind of channel in there, just there, see? It's also much more finely divided at the end, but we can use that in exactly the same way to extract a gel. So yeah, that's kind of how it was, and it will help you distinguish the two as well. But yeah, so I got a whole load of this, maybe a couple of handfuls, and I boiled it up and I made the gel that I was talking about, and it's still a little bit warm, so it hasn't fully set. It will set like a hard jelly, but so it mainly has, but actually no, that's not true. It has a lot of food applications, but also for cosmetics. Ugh. Now, it's just about warm. I did once read, and I don't know if it's true, I once read that this was used in the Alien films to make the slime. I can kind of imagine it, because I mean it is so slimy. Probably a slightly too much information type thing, but it's out there. That is, you know, this has been used as a natural sexual lubricant. In fact, partly because I was banging on about it to my friend Mark Boyle, who lived for a year without money. He looks at all aspects of life where you can source your things from the wild without having to spend anything. I think he's got a section in his book, The Moneyless Man, on wild sex or free sex or something, and he includes my recipe for extracting this gel for sexual lubricant. But actually, it's really stopped the kind of itching in my hand, which is kind of nice. Probably go all kind of crispy and disgusting later, but there we are. But the main thing is kind of, I use that for, is making panna cottas. So when we're thinking about seaweeds, apart from like timing your arrival for the low tide, and ideally, you know, on a new moon or a full moon or a couple of days out after, that's when it's going to go out furthest. And ideally, particularly in the summer months, is time your arrival for when it's almost out but it's still going out, rather than on incoming tide. If you're trying to gather stuff on an incoming tide, if you know exactly what you want and it's kind of mid-tide, you might get there in time. But if you want some of the kelps and things like that, you're kind of racing against time, as I did. So what I did manage to get before chaos ensued with my trying to set up as the tide was coming in was some really nice laver. And look, by nice, what I mean is stuff that I can use in different ways than I would if I was making lava bread or lava bread. Because another application for it, apart from obviously, or not so obviously, making nori sheets the way the Japanese, Koreans, Chinese would do, which is great fun, by the way. And I might do a video on just making that, because I've been making that for quite a few years now with native seaweeds. But another use for it is using it as a wrap. So what I like to do, particularly if I'm by the beach, is get some fish. So got a nice bit of sea bass there, and essentially wrap it and cook it in the fire there. Well, not in the fire, on the hot embers. I'll show you. So the challenge is to get nice bits, big bits without any holes. It's easier said than done, but they are out there. I know when you see it all on the beach, it doesn't look very promising, but in terms of flavour and versatility of use, this is just one of the best seaweeds that there is. Laver. So, like that. Get some fish in there. Now that's just one layer of seaweed, but I could do more. And I picked a little bit of wild fennel earlier, so I'm going to put that in there. Quite a lot, because I love fennel. And in like previous videos, we talked about succulent plant stems, and fennel at this time of year is exactly that. Absolutely amazingly delicious. In fact, you don't really need to peel it. You can peel it a little bit, but amazing aniseedy wonderfulness. So you could put in some other things you might find coastally. Marsh samphire when the season comes, it's very small at the moment, but that would give a nice kind of salty flavour inside there. Perhaps you could put some Alexanders in there, some sea purslane. So kind of just wrap it over and then put another bit. Over the top. Now, what you didn't see is I washed this really well in the sea, because it can get bits of grit. Even now I can see that little bit of grit. So I washed it really well, but even then not quite well enough. But I think I got all the finer sandy bits out. There was just that one bit of grit there. There we are. It's the one I prepared earlier. I love saying this now. It's one of my favourite things to say on video. is one I prepared earlier. So what I'm going to do is, I don't know if you can see from there, let's bring the camera a bit closer. So I'm just going to lay them in the pit. However, can you see that? The important thing with this is, although, yeah, sure, I could just keep them in the seaweed and put them straight on the embers, and then essentially the seaweed would just be a wrap, and I throw it away later, because it's all kind of ashy and burnt. But you know, integral to this way of using the seaweed that I'm doing is that we eat the seaweed as well. I mean, it's a crucial part of it. Oh, God. So what I'm going to do there is nice ember bed. And I'm just going to put a thin layer of another seaweed on there, which is some wrack. Some bladder wrack. I don't know if you can see that, but it's going like really green where it hits the hot embers. That's just to form a little barrier. How's the smoke going? Yes. And then I'm just going to lay these down on there like that. Now sometimes I put some more seaweed over the top, but this time, just because I can and I've got it, I'm going to use this lovely chopping board. Just put that over the top, and just because we got this lovely fresh cliff fall, I'm going to bury it with the kind of sandy soil that's kind of fallen down here. We bury the whole thing. Going to set the temperature dial. There it is. Just turn the slipper limpet to 180. And set the timer for 20 minutes. So while that's pit cooking, we're just starting another fire over here to deep fry the seaweed. come down here a little bit so you can see each other. Now, one seaweed I gathered at the extreme low tide this morning was a seaweed that I kind of briefly showed you earlier, but let's look in more detail. And so this is two pieces actually, and it's Laminaria digitata. And there's multiple kind of fronds like this, and so this is absolutely fantastic. One of my favourite things for doing with this is, particularly when it's really young, this one and related sugar kelp, is to cook them with maple syrup and dry them to a crisp. Absolutely delicious. But although we've used laver as a wrap there, we could use these bits just to wrap fish. That would be great as well, or meats or vegetables, other things. And yeah, I mean, there's so many uses for this. We could make wonderful kind of liquid kind of seasoning by boiling it up for ages. We can do things with the stems. We can incorporate it into soups. We can cook it as a vegetable. We could tempura it. But what I kind of like to do when I'm kind of working on this series of videos is kind of look at things that is beyond the obvious, just a little bit beyond the obvious, but an extension of the more kind of obvious. So using the same principles. So in this case, what I like to do a lot of, and I covered it in one video, is pickling. So of course I could pickle any part of this. I could shred this and pickle it. I could pickle the stems. That's quite good, particularly if you cook it for a bit to tenderize it first. But what I really love at this time of year is these gorgeous fronds. Forget fronds. These gorgeous holdfasts. So by holdfast, it's essentially, it looks a bit like a root, but it's not a root, because unlike land plants, seaweeds don't have roots. They have just structures, and it could be a disc, it could be something that looks vaguely root-like that clamps it to the rock so that it doesn't get dislodged by the sea. And so we've got kind of last year's holdfast, which are really kind of quite brown, but what we've got coming is these new ones, and they're kind of very antler-like. And I picked a few this morning, and this is where I could say, look at this. That's me picking a few this morning, but I put them in my pocket, and let me show you some of these, some real beauties. This was my particular favourite. Look at that. So the reason I love to pickle these is because they have such a great texture, really great texture, but also their appearance is really lovely. So there's another one. a Y for yes, this makes a great pickle. Now, one thing I should say is, you know, in the search for kind of new flavors, new textures, new ingredients, there is the possibility that one gets into things which are kind of quite rare, or yeah, in some way that basically one shouldn't ideally get into from a sustainability point of view. And I guess, yeah, certainly there is an issue with this. So I would never ever gather seaweed unless it was like this, basically. What I'm saying is I wouldn't yank this off the rock. I would kind of cut that there, and I think it can regenerate from this. And in terms of this was kind of just washed up. It was a great one. I think it's been washed up recently because it's still in really good condition. But in terms of using these holdfast, what I do is I go down to the shore at the best possible time, new moon, full moon, and really the best time for this particular seaweed and gathering these, I would say, is the month of May. We're not far off it. And what I do, because you see this one has many aspects, many branches to the holdfast, and you know there are vast quantities of this seaweed, I would take like one holdfast from one piece of laminaria, and then one from another and another and another until I've got enough. Now, I didn't really get enough today simply because the tide was rushing in, but what I did do is just get enough to make a small jar of pickled kelp holdfasts. Well, a small jar, and it's quite a big jar actually, isn't it? But that's okay because I'm going to put other things. I'm going to shred a lot of this, and actually I'm going to come down tonight and get some more seaweeds. But the thing I thought I'd show you is, and I wonder, we might have to look back at the beginning of this video, but because I didn't mention it, because I was going to mention it, but the tide was rushing in and now there's none to be seen. But it's the stuff that grows like green hair quite high up the shore, and that's called over-intestinalia, and it's like thin green fronds, but actually it's like a hollow tube, hence the intestinalia part, and because of that you get like sandy bits in there, so it's quite hard to kind of cook with. That fire just needs some attention. Hang on a second. Right, that's a lot better. So what was I saying? Okay, so I was saying that the gutweed, the over-intestinalia, can be a little tricky to cook because of like the sand, but it makes an excellent flavouring for vinegar. So what I've done here, and this is going to be the vinegar I put in for my pickle, is some seaweed vinegar that I made with over-intestinalia last year. Now, yes, it's cloudy because we're kind of working outside, and this is just for illustrative purposes. So, several ways of making seaweed vinegar, and it's wonderful, by the way, if you've not had seaweed vinegar before. And this is what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to get loads of this, enough to kind of lightly, well, basically about a gallon's worth, and by volume. So what I'm going to do with that, I'm going to make some seaweed wine, which I then turn into vinegar. Now I did this about 20 years ago, and out of over-intestinalia, it fermented really well. It was a strong wine, but I was just into experimenting with lots of different wines, and I kind of tasted it, and it was just so disgusting, just because the idea of a seaweedy wine is just, I couldn't get my head around it. And I'm embarrassed to say this, or maybe not, because it kind of seemed obvious at the time, but I kind of tipped it all down the sink. And I was telling someone this a few years later, and they said, well, why didn't you just kind of expose it to the air, let it go off, and let it turn to vinegar and turn it into wine? And it's like, oh, yeah, why didn't I? So I did that year, deliberately do that, and it just makes the most amazing seaweed vinegar, which is brilliant for various kind of Japanese kind of dishes. But that's one way. The other way I've done here is, yeah, I've just put the seaweed in an existing vinegar. It was white wine vinegar, and what I would normally do, I would then strain that out and filter it so it's clear, and then use that for pickling and dressings and stuff. So that's why it's a bit cloudy, because I haven't filtered it yet. And it's so cloudy you can't even see the fronds in there. But they're in there. Now, just while that's boiling down, I thought I would tell you about one of the best guides to seaweeds, and that's, I don't know if this is going to come out backwards or not, I think it probably is, but it's Seaweeds of Britain Island by Frances Bunker, Juliet Brodie, Christine Magson and Anne Bunker, and it's just the best guide, hands down, full stop, to seaweed identification that there is. Now, the one I've got here is the first edition, because I couldn't find my copy of the new second edition. But what's so good about it is, when we think about how many seaweeds there are in the British Isles, and it's somewhere between 650 and 700 species of seaweed. And now, some of those, they're either incredibly small, they grow beyond like the low tide marks and never exposed on the shore by the retreating tide, or they're just incredibly rare. Now, a lot of the reds are going to be out there, because like seaweeds are kind of categorized into reds, browns and greens, and the majority of reds, and a lot of those are those species that grow beyond the kind of low tide mark, but not necessarily. There can also be red species throughout the shore. But basically, from a foraging point of view, from a food point of view, they are not of interest. Now, although this book, Seaweeds of Britain Island, is not written from a foraging point of view, it's written from an ease of identification point of view, from a kind of amateur seaweed enthusiast, not your kind of professional phycologist, as seaweed experts are called. So because of that, what they've done, they've selected, now in this one, they've included 200 of the most common seaweed. I can't remember how many there are in the second edition, but they're a few more. And they've included ones that don't require a microscope for identification, because often just like looking at the cells is needed for identification. But the ones they've selected are ones that just require, at most, a hand lens to look at some of the finer detail, but no microscopes. So, you know, that's brilliant. Great job. Now, the other thing is, it's partly from a point of view of identification, but just also because it's a lovely thing to do. Particularly if you go to a shore that you don't know and you gather kind of some seaweeds and you want to identify them kind of later, because it's, you know, somewhere you don't have the opportunity to maybe go back to on a regular basis, but you're really interested to see what the seaweeds are. So you might gather some, even in the strand line. Now, the strand line is kind of where it's washed up, and it's not a place where we'd gather for food, but it's possibly a place where we would gather to see what's growing on that shore, particularly if the tide's coming in and what's further out we can't see. It might be in the strand line, so it gives you a good snapshot that what could be on the shore if you timed your arrival perfectly. Although of course some of it could have come in as drift from elsewhere. But what's really nice to do, I do a lot of this, is I gather seaweeds and I press them. And it's just a lovely thing to do in itself. So, oh, this I discovered some seaweed that I put on some paper. I discovered this last night and I haven't removed it, and it's gone rotten. But fortunately, these are in plastic kind of sheets. Look at that, isn't that lovely? That one, unsurprisingly, its common name is sea oak. Phycodryas rubens. I'll show you a few more of these. Check on that fire. Oh, this is nice because it shows you now some natural variation. So earlier on I mentioned a plant you could mistake for Dulse, which was beautiful eyelash weed. Caliblepharis ciliata, beautiful eyelash weed. Now these are both beautiful eyelash weed, but look at the natural variation. Actually, like Dulse as well, the kind of new growth grows from this kind of central kind of mother frond, as I call it. But the main thing is that, like here, that's not new growth, that's just the kind of edge of the frond, which has, I never know what to call that thing, that's why I was struggling to describe it. Yeah, ciliata are both like cilia, like, you know, little kind of bits like on your inside your intestines. Like, that's the best description I can come up with. But that's not new growth, it's not like a straight line edge of the frond like you would have in Dulse. What else? Let's have a look at a couple more. More for their beauty than identification. Oh, this is kind of nice. So we've got a green there, which is sea lettuce, but this was a really big bit. And you see where it's at the edge, it's kind of folded over. Although I picked this 10 years ago and the colour is holding up while it's closed in the book and in the dark essentially. On the edge you can see it's kind of bleached out and lost its colour. Now I'm looking for my favourite one here. Let's see if we can find it. Oh, this is a lovely one. So there's some seaweeds. This is Desmerestia ligulata, and some seaweeds that produce sulfuric acid type compounds, really quite strong. I'm not sure if it's this one that gets up to pH 2, but it's a good example why it's best not to pick from the strand line for eating, because although this one is one that grows out usually beyond the low tide, but sometimes right at the low tide mark, it can detach and then drift in and be in the strand line. So it might kind of look fresh, but not a good one to eat with that high level, really high level of acidity. You can do other funky things with it though. Get on to my favourite one. Where are you? Where are you hiding? That's kind of funky, look at that. Ooh. Actually, I've got two favourite ones. Aha, there it is. It doesn't grow around these parts. Look at that. Yeah, so where did I pick that? So this is from St Agnes, the Isle of Scilly, 13th of August 2010. Palmaria esculenta. my kind of favourite, one of my favourite edible seaweeds. I've got about 5 really top favourites. And the final one I'll show you before I check on it. In fact, before that, I'm going to put this pan on the fire because I need to get the oil really hot. Cooking oil, generous amounts. The cheapest cooking oil I could get this morning. It's like sunflower oil. I remember when I started running courses back in 2003, and every course I do, which is the kind of day-long one, I end up cooking on the beach and deep frying seaweed. But for some insane reason, for the first 5 years, and I use like 6 litres of oil, like 3 times 3 litres, and then it gets a little bit charred and burnt with like the seaweed that I'm deep frying, and I'd put another one in. And I used to use like bottles of the most expensive sunflower oil. It's like £30 a time just to burn some oil for a little crispy seaweed. Insane, insane. Look at that. Heterosiphonia plumosa. Did I get that right? Heterosiphonia plumosa, yeah. Look at that. It's such a beautiful seaweed. It's one of the kind of fern-like delicate reds, and not really a tradition of eating that at all, but it's a beautiful one, and it's great for making lovely cards for people. So yeah, pressing seaweed's a really lovely thing to do. Now, there's a little bit of water in that pan. This is great because I want to just hear it just really starting to spit before I add the seaweed. But just as that gets up to temperature, I'm going to show you something which is kind of nice really, because it's a rare opportunity when you're abiding by the rules of not kind of uprooting plants. For the obvious reasons, it's not sustainable really, but you know, if you're really hungry and it's a survival situation, yeah, sure, uproot plants. But we live in the UK, there's kind of no need to be kind of starving, is there? Or, you know, digging up roots. However, sometimes you don't need to, because the roots have dug themselves up. And what I love about situations like this is, well, I'll probably pull back and show you where we are, but I'm at the base of a sandstone cliff, and kind of high up there we kind of got a grassy area by the sea, and we got very recent cliff fall here. And I was walking along earlier and I found these plants, which, what else did I find? Another one. Oh, that was it. Plants that I use a lot, a couple of which I do use the root of, and this is a really sad looking example, but you just have to look it up. So this is Alexander's, just in flower, and we got some of the very young flowers which are great eaten raw or pickled or put in a salad. Those. But the root of Alexander's also amazing. Now, Alexander's is one of those plants that the clever Romans introduced, and I think they're clever just because perhaps they introduced it because they realised or knew that every single part of the plant was edible. So we've got the stem, we've got the the roots, we've got the immature flowers, the mature flowers, the seeds, but the root is something that doesn't often get a look in it. So if I washed it, I haven't washed it at all, and it's been around a couple of days because it's getting a bit soft. But although there is some mud there, it's actually, the root is got a thin black skin, but below that you can see white. And the other thing about it is, unlike many kind of plant roots which are really fibrous, this is essentially as tender as a carrot. So I can eat that, I can enjoy it without having a mouthful of fibre or having to spit something out afterwards. The other thing I would say about it is, like many wild foods, if you've not eaten many, you might be surprised about the intensity of flavours. This is really strong, but I love strong flavours. But in terms of working it into recipes, it can be quite a challenge. I love this with other roots and grated potato and things like this in coras. You know, those lovely savoury, spicy, chickpea based deep fried delicacies. So the other thing we've got here, and this is a plant which I highly recommend you eat the succulent stem of when the time's ready, which is kind of really May, just before the flower is starting to show, or like the immature flower, and that is wild carrot. You see the hairs on that? It's kind of quite, it's like a bit like cow parsley, in the same family, but it's much more hairy, and it has a kind of parsnip coloured, kind of maybe a bit lighter root. It's a really small one, but these tend to be kind of quite fibrous. They can be, but they have an amazing flavour, obviously like carrot flavour. That's as sandy as hell. But the flavour's good. Pure, delicious carrot flavour. What else? There's one other thing. Oh, that was it. So, in a couple of videos, I've mentioned and talked about and used both in a salad and as a vegetable, ribwort plantain. So there's several plantains in this country, and this is, I would say, this is one of the most distinct, certainly one of the most beautiful in terms of the leaf. And this is Plantago coronopus, or if you think what that might be called, it's called buckshorn plantain. So it's mainly coastal, or I have seen it, I mean I saw a load of this on Hampstead Heath, and it's kind of interesting because like the others it kind of grows in a kind of rosette form, much more so actually. I guess that's the coronopus part, and but it's the only one of the plantains that I know that anywhere in the world it is commercially grown, and that's in Italy. It's grown as a vegetable, and surprisingly, the one, I guess it's a selectively bred, but the one that's grown as a vegetable, it's the same variety, Plantago coronopus, but it's much more tender, much more like a salad leaf actually. Whereas this one, can't really tell just from a video, but it's really quite thick, quite a thick leaf. But you can eat that raw or cooked. Right, the oil's almost ready for deep frying the seaweed. I'm just wondering whether to get the camera a bit closer so you can see, or maybe I should keep it a safe distance. Just check it. Yep, it's definitely sizzling. So I'm only going to cook, deep fry one seaweed. Actually, maybe I'll do two. Maybe I'll do a bit of that too. But I'm going to do some of, which is always everybody's favourites when I'm running courses, and just my personal favourite too. And that's the Dulse. Now, note how it's kind of red now, kind of maroony red. And get everything ready. This is going to splash, maybe splash quite a lot. So you don't want to do this inside, believe me. But when you've got all this space, it's a wonderful thing to do. So here we go, deep fried Dulse. There we go, look at that, lovely green. Crispy. Now I didn't wash it. I did wash it, but I didn't wash it under a tap, because that would be the temptation if I'd kind of picked this earlier and gone home and wanted to prepare it there. For example, there you might brush it with oil and stick it in the food dehydrator kind of to get this same kind of quality of crispy seaweed. But I've washed it in the sea just because the natural salt on there is such an integral part of the flavour. I could eat this all day. So that one. Let's do a little bit of this. Tends to be quite explosive, that one. One of my favourite coastal plants, sea beet or wild spinach. So I put a tiny bit of that on, and then we dig up the laver-wrapped sea bass, see how it is. Now, one of the great advantages of pit cooking is that, yeah, fish fillets like the bit of sea bass I showed you only take about 20 minutes. But, you know, if you kind of do it a bit longer, or if you forget forget about it. It's all contained in that lovely kind of wrapping, so it doesn't matter so much. You can see why I put the board on it, stop all the dirt getting in there, bits of sand, bits of soil. Whew. There they are. So much smoke in my eyes I can't see. Can you? Sea beet should be ready. Let's grab a fork. Why not chop on a book, even if you've got a chopping board? Really looking forward to this. So there we are, a very, very short introduction to seaweeds and a couple of coastal plants, some ways of cooking, and if you'd like to learn more about the ways that you can cook, seaweed, I did write a really long article about seaweed, and when I put this up on YouTube, I've never done this, I've always wanted to see this, it's down there, it's in the link. Ooh, there it is. It's really long, but it's got lots of creative ideas for working with seaweed and links, lots of links in there as well to courses you can attend for identification, cooking, I guess, and yeah, much else besides. So until next time. Oh, actually, I'll just say that on Monday, next time I do this, I'll be on my way home to my self-isolating situation, but I'm going to stop off at a salt marsh. So I'm going to do, oh joy, a simple forage with no advanced preparation, no incoming tide, and we're going to look at both salt marsh plants, and I'm going to go on a circular walk and we'll look at hedgerow plants. So it's going to be hedgerow and salt marsh. I think it's going to be a good one. This one's been a bit chaotic, but I've enjoyed it and I'm enjoying this too. So I hope you did, and I will see you hopefully on Monday. Happy St. George's Day, or happy day after St. George's Day, or happy days beyond St. George's Day and throughout the whole year. See you soon. But I'm just going to show you one more thing when I've finished this. I think you'll like it. I'm going to like it. See you next time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being you. Thanks for wild food. Thanks for the sun and the sea and the earth. And thank you.